No country in the world has ever developed by just becoming a supermarket economy for other countries. Unless we generate, unless we have capacity to industrialize. This is why in this country we are talking about Vision 2030. And therefore we do need trade reforms all around. This is a reform time everywhere. Unless we reform the way we do business between ourselves, unless we also increase intra-Africa trade. You heard me give you some very interesting statistics that within a span of 2 decades almost, the trade between African states has grown by about 2%, 10% to 12%. That tells you that we are even not able to interact properly with each other. And this has a problem of connectivity between ourselves, air transport connectivity. It is easier for one to move from, if you want to go from here to Guinea-Conakry or to Burkina Faso, you may find that it's easier for you to fly first to Europe and then come back to Africa. Now, if we cannot correct these distortions, we cannot see improvement in intra-African trade. That is my submission to you. So what are the lessons from Asia? Early explanations of the Asian miracle, remember the Asian tigers, focused on the apparent openness to external markets in contrast with the failed import substitution approach pursued by Africa. Now it is recognized that Asia's success was facilitated by the state in fostering export competitiveness, maintaining export-friendly exchange rates, and even subsidies to exporters. Therefore, I think the state, as a deliberate, you know, that policy of free trade, laissez-faire, may be seen to be the preferred option. But I think a state, an African state, I want to submit, must in the first place direct energy. And therefore, leadership at the very top becomes very vital if you are going to drive the African economy the right way. The challenge is that of trade liberalization, focusing on removing impediments to imports, but providing little guidance on how to strengthen export capacity and promote diversification. Unless we seriously industrialize and do serious business between ourselves, because we are happy that now East Africa, July 1st, is beginning to implement the protocol on common market. This is tremendous. And I think there's a sense of goodwill within the region where East Africans are now beginning to think in terms of East Africa, you know, the 5 freedoms, the freedom of establishment, the freedom of movements of goods and services. And so they are all looking forward to the time when there is going to be free movement, literally, where East Africans can just visit each other and move across. Because if you go to our western border with Uganda, you'll be amazed. You'll really be amazed. There's nothing there. All their representatives in an effective, transparent, impartial, and accountable manner subject to resource constraints. And conflict management refers to a society's capacity to mediate the conflicting, though not necessarily violent, interests of different social groups through political processes. State reconstruction combines national and supranational competencies for resolving violent conflicts, sustaining peace, and undertaking economic and political post-conflict reconstruction. In the past decade, this nexus of governance and state building has moved from relative obscurity to being a central issue on Africa's development policy agenda. So, governance. Africa today is stressing the fight against corruption. Africa today is saying we must have our people living in relative peace with each other. Perhaps that act of joining in the first coalition with President Kibaki is what stopped this country from complete breakdown of law and order. And so that by now perhaps we'll be talking about United Nations offices, United Nations peacekeeping operations in Kenya. We were fortunate, and God helped this country because through the intervention of eminent personalities in Africa, President Kufur of Ghana in the first place. The rest of our team was able to come. This can also be political corruption, I want to suggest. And political corruption is one that gets imposed from outside. Think about that. And then we must get rid of the problem of IDPs. This is a challenge I want to pose to us this morning.
We'll write some journals for the college. They normally talk of issues that they deal with in the college. And Mupate the fact. So, no, well,